I'm Felipe from TECHcetera, and I'm here with Pablo. He's going to introduce himself, and we're going to have a quick talk.
Cool. So my name's Pablos, and I'm from Seattle. I work at the Intellectual Ventures Lab, inventing new technologies.
Okay, that sounds great.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your day-to-day job. What do you do?
Well, most companies might have people that are inventing maybe a faster, cheaper version of whatever they did last year. But not a lot of people are incentivized to go invent next generation technologies. What's going to be technically possible in 5 or 10 years. And that's what invention is really about, but a lot of people don't get to work on that stuff because there's no business around it. So we try to change that. And so my job is to look at an industry and try and figure out what they're going to want in 5 or 10 years and what's technically possible in that horizon and try to invent that stuff.
Okay, tell us a little bit about internet security. How you see it
Sure.
now, and how you think that it will be in the next 5 to 10 years?
Right. Well, I'm a computer hacker, and my whole career I've been working on doing new things with computers, and a lot of times that means creating lots of security problems or trying to fix them. And, you know, what I think a lot of people, experience is they read about these problems in the paper, in the news or whatever, about, hackers got into this and stole 1 million credit card numbers or whatever it is. And it's very technical and complex, and it's hard for people to get a sense of how that could affect them. And when you take that and you see computers going everywhere that they haven't been before, and you were mentioning smart cities earlier, new places that we're going to start deploying computers, it's a little scary to think about what that could mean from a security perspective. And I think of it in a really fundamental way. What I think is that it's important to understand that, first of all, these problems aren't going away. We're not going to fix them. We don't have a solution that's going to make everything secure. That's never happened before. It's a war of escalation. And over time, we find problems, and then we figure out what to do about them. And then we find new problems, and we figure out what to do about them. And that keeps going. And we've gotten really good at playing that game, is the truth. When you look back at the kinds of things that we're experiencing now, problems you might have with computers in cars or in phones and things like that. A lot of that is just because they lag behind PCs. So on a PC, we had all these problems decades ago. And so we invented things like System Update. And System Update gives us an ability to go and fix a problem after the fact. Once it's discovered, we can go update those systems and keep them current so that they're not vulnerable to the same problems. And that's a really important, really fundamental security measure. But we don't have that in our cars yet.
Or in the things, Internet of Things.
And we absolutely don't have it in the Internet of Things yet. But we will. And we're suffering some of the problems right now of having deployed a lot of those things without System Update. And so now we're starting to redesign them with System Update. And that's just one example, but the point is to understand we've seen all this before, and we've figured out what to do about these problems. And we've got to get more disciplined about how we handle them. You're never going to make things secure. It's like, looking at your house as an example. If you go to the front door, there's a lock on the front door that you can learn how to pick in 30 seconds from a YouTube video. And that's always been true. And you can go spend $500 and get a really nice expensive lock that's impossible to pick, or at least no one knows how to pick yet. But you're going to install it in the door right next to the window. Right? And it takes about 30 seconds to find a rock and throw it through the window. And it's normal to, especially when you can't measure it and you don't understand it, to get a little bit terrified of the potential problems. But a lot of the time, what's important is to have some experience with those problems, get a sense of what the real risks are. With computer security, a lot of times nobody's coming after you, and you're fine. And so, we often say that, if you're being chased by a bear, you don't have to be able to run faster than the bear. You only have to be able to run faster than your friends.
Yeah.
And so it's important to have ideas about security like that, where you understand how to put it in perspective, and it helps you figure out how much effort you need to put into making things secure.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about smart cities.
Okay.
So do you see that like a reality also in Latin America? Are we near to that concept or not?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's an advantage in a way in a lot of places in Latin America, and this is kind of true all over the world. If you're south of the equator, then you have less structured cities to begin with. And so something that's new and useful can be a lot easier to deploy. When you're in really old established cities and you want to change something, cities in Germany or England or in the U.S. even, there's a lot of like bureaucratic momentum around not changing, and so it's very difficult to do new things. So I'd say Latin American cities are probably uniquely positioned to be a good place to start doing these things early. There's a lot of potential in what we call smart cities, and that's around, fundamentally it's around taking computers, putting them in everything, and then using the data that we get from that to help us make better decisions about what to do. That's really what it's all about. And using computers and deploying computers almost all the time, the key thing going on is that we have giant computers that can analyze a lot of data. We have a network that can bring the data to the giant computer. And we have every day new kinds of sensors that can collect data. And a sensor could be anything. I mean, historically, you think of it as like something to measure the temperature or measure power consumption or something. We could have sensors everywhere that see how many people are crossing this street, what are cars doing, how many times does this ATM get used, all those kinds of things. The more data you have into your giant supercomputer model, the more intelligent decisions you're able to make around deploying resources, designing your city, figuring out how to optimally position where the business districts should be, how big the residential districts should be, how much money should be spent on promoting, one thing or another, and how to incentivize people to, offset their commute or, eat lunch at home instead of going out, all those kinds of things. There's a million little things like that can be improved, but it's very difficult to do if you don't have good data. You're just guessing about what to do. And historically, we've done a lot of guessing. We tried our best to make educated guesses, but the fundamental thing that's different in the world today is that computers can analyze an unlimited amount of data and help us choose an optimal path. And that's what smart cities is really about.
Okay, in that sense, all the big data that we have and all the technology, do you think that those things are going to help us solve the problems of humanity, something like the global warming and things like that?
Yeah, so, what we call anthropogenic global warming, which means, things humans have done to make the environment a little bit worse. A lot of the time, we're having difficulty getting people to take responsibility for their contribution to that. And the reason is because historically we couldn't measure and show and correlate what human actions were doing to what was happening in the environment. And we're getting better at that all the time. And I think that it's very difficult to go, if you look at global warming in the 80s, if you went to, a coal plant and said, hey, you're burning a lot of coal, it's putting a lot of CO2 in the environment and it's heating up the planet. There was no good evidence for that. You got laughed out of the room. Nobody could be convinced that it was something to worry about because we've been burning coal for 100 years and it's working fine. So what I think is happening now is we're able to start putting these cases together with better data to substantiate them. We're starting to get people to look at those things, understand them. We're getting a little more societal pressure around making sure that people are accountable for their contribution. That's just one example. But what to do about it, other than just stop emitting carbon, can be really complex, and we need a whole bunch of different solutions working together. And so what the computational models do, what big data does for us, is gives us an ability to go figure out how much work is it going to take? What are the steps that we need to take to optimally go and improve on what's happening in the climate? And so that's a huge part of what needs to be done. That's a very important, very long-term, large-scale kind of problem to solve. But there are lots of other ones that are closer to home. And I think the really important thing to recognize is that we are going to improve on those things, but it's work that we have to do. Lots of those things are around making the world safer, making it more probable for humans to be able to live and survive, healthier lives, those kinds of things. I call that quantity of life. Make sure more people can stay alive and stay alive longer. That's what technology's been really, really good for. That's what got us here where we are today. But there's another class of problems that technology isn't solving, and that's what I think of as quality of life problems, right? When you look at the what's happening, America as an example is kind of on the leading edge of deploying technology. We live, very healthy, very wealthy lives. It's very difficult to make a case that anyone in America is living a happier life than anyone in Latin America.
Yeah.
Right? And that's because we don't have a way for technology to solve those problems. So it's really important to understand the distinction and know what the potential is. Yeah, we could solve global warming and you could still be miserable.
Totally.
So we need to really start understanding that and thinking about it in that way, and understand which kinds of problems technology is going to solve and is going to be helpful with, and which kinds of problems humans need to go work on independently.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure.